Good morning, everyone. Hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Gregory Ormsby Mori. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Center for Agroforestry. This is the Agroforestry in Action webinar series, held approximately monthly, usually on Wednesdays about this time, 11 o'clock, and we try to showcase some of the latest or greatest work in agroforestry research and practice. So please check in at our website, agroforestryinaction.org, for updates on the webinar series, and as well as both upcoming presentations and recorded presentations of previous webinars. Our guest today is Dr. Florencia Montagnini, and she'll be presenting on the contribution of agroforestry to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 2, as you see in your screen here, which outlines objectives to end hunger and achieve food security. Dr. Montagnini is a senior research scientist and director of the program in tropical forestry and the Global Institute of Sustainable Forestry at Yale University in the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. She's been a professor there in the practice of tropical forestry since, I think, 2001. And prior to that, from about 1997 to 2001, she held various positions at the Tropical Agricultural Research and Higher Education Center. That's CATIE, a great institution there in Turrialba, Costa Rica. Including she was a director there of the area of management and conservation of forest and biodiversity. Dr. Montagnini began her studies at in agronomy at the National University of Rosario in Argentina. And she completed her PhD in ecology at the University of Georgia, Athens, Georgia, in 1985. Dr. Montagnini has written extensively on agroforestry topics, dozens of publications, hundreds of journal publications, and about 10 books, I think, on agroforestry. Her work focuses on the sustainability of forests and agroforestry systems, with a special emphasis on Latin America. She researches sustainable land use systems that integrate both ecological principles with economic, social, and political factors. She's currently conducting projects in regions encompassing major types of tropical and subtropical forests in Latin America, in collaboration with institutions such as CATIE and universities and other academic and private or government institutions throughout the Latin American region, including, I think, a series of agroecology trainings that were just conducted in collaboration with CIPAV in Colombia and SOCLA, it's the Sociedad Científica de Agroecología, Agroecological Scientific Society. So Dr. Montagnini has an extensive career in research and studying agroforestry topics. So we're excited to have her with us here today to learn more about this perspective on agroforestry contributing to sustainable development goals. Florencia, I think you're with us. Is your mic on?
Yep, perfect.
Well, it's great to have you with us. So please, I should mention that Dr. Montagnini's presentation will run about 40 to 45 minutes.
Yes.
And after that, we'll have at least 10, maybe 15 minutes for a question and answer period, and I'll open up a Q&A box that the participants can write in some questions. And so total will run about an hour. So once again, let's please welcome our guest today, Dr. Florencia Montagnini.
Okay, so you leave it to me now, Gregory.
Yes, please go ahead. I'm going to mute my mic so there's no potential interference here. So please, take it away.
You remind me how to pass the slides with the cursor, yeah?
Oh, right. If you look at your lower left corner down there, you'll see two arrows, one facing in either direction. And that's how you advance or retreat on the slides. Can you see that?
Okay. Yeah, I think I can manage. Thank you very much, Gregory, for the introduction, very detailed introduction that you made of me. It's an honor today to be with you. I'm very happy to contribute to this Agroforestry in Action webinar. As Gregory said, I've written extensively on agroforestry and related issues, agroecology, tropical forest ecology, biodiversity as well. And I'm now writing book number 10, in which Gregory and colleagues from the Center of Agroforestry will contribute to. So as a chapter for this book, I'm writing I'm writing about the contribution of agroforestry to sustainable development too, which is the subject of the talk of today. And you'll see here in the opening slide the variety of agroforestry systems, just to introduce you to some of the research that we have been conducting with our collaborators in Latin America. But although the emphasis in Latin America, I have been working on agroforestry throughout the world, and you'll see that as we advance. How do we get to the next slide? I don't see the arrows here.
Do you see the arrows on the lower left of your screen?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Found it. Yes, thanks.
There we go. Great.
So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk first about how important is agroforestry worldwide for rural livelihoods. We'll give you some numbers there. We are going to put major emphasis during the talk today on the importance of indigenous knowledge on sustainable land uses. Many people around the world have used traditionally land uses, have practiced land uses with incredible knowledge on sustainability and how to do it. And we need to take advantage of that for our purposes. What are major constraints to rural development goals? Why is it that sometimes rural development, or often rural development projects don't reach their goals? And then how can agroforestry contribute to sustainable development goals too, the ones that we are just talking about today? What are some conditions that agroforestry systems have to fulfill to be able to contribute? Then we're going to the subject, to the core of the talk, when we're talking about the integration of indigenous and scientific knowledge. And we'll give you some examples of how some products that are produced by some indigenous communities can be marketed and the supply chains can be improved. So the examples I'm going to use today are from research we have been carrying along for several years. Yerba mate, guayusa, which is another type of yerba mate, cacao. These are agroforestry systems with permanent crops that are being practiced in many parts of the world. Then we'll go on with examples of rural development projects that use agroforestry systems to achieve sustainable development goals. And for that, I'm going to use examples from the FTA, Forest, Trees and Agroforestry program of the CGIAR. I'm sure everyone knows what the CG system is. I was an evaluator of the FTA program for a couple of years, 2013, 2014, and I'm currently in the steering committee of the FTA program, so I'm very familiar with several of their projects. And I'm going to bring your attention to 3 projects that I think exemplify very well what FTA can do to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. And those are the Evergreen Agriculture projects, the Tree Crops Development Project, the Ag4 project. I'll explain to you in detail about that. And of course, we'll go through some conclusions. And just to illustrate this slide, I'm showing you some nice views from Sumatra, Indonesia, when I was conducting these evaluations that I told you about a few years ago. We were visiting areas of Sumatra and Sulawesi for the most part, and we were looking at what FTA is doing regarding environmental services, sustainable agriculture. These are some of our collaborators there. Okay, so now talking about the importance of agroforestry worldwide. This is an interesting number. About 1.6 billion people throughout the world depend on forests and tree resources for their livelihoods. And when we're saying tree resources, we're thinking not only about forests, but individual trees that may be in farms. Of those, more than 800 million, which happens to be 30% of the global rural population, live on a total of 9.5 million square kilometers of agricultural land, which has more than 10% tree cover. And another 180 million people live on 3.5 million square kilometers with more than 30% tree cover. And those percentages of tree cover, 10 to 30%, agroforestry systems are considered to be agroforestry systems when the percent tree cover, area of tree cover in the agricultural land is between 10 and 30%. So all that is agroforestry. This is substantial amount of people and a substantial area of land worldwide. The most frequent agroforestry systems that we find worldwide are annual and perennial crops under shade, as you can see here in the slide. Starting from the left side, you can see there coffee under shade. That's one of the most frequently found worldwide permanent crops under shade. Yerba mate next to it to the right, then some annual crops you can see there. And you can see in the slides also some silvopastoral systems with sheep, with cattle, and then some multi-strata agroforestry systems. Some of these are more traditional systems. Some of these are more improved types of agroforestry systems, more modern types of agroforestry systems. Many indigenous communities that are descendants of local groups, local ethnic groups, many indigenous groups, they practice different types of agroforestry systems, as you see here in the slide. One of the most common agroforestry systems worldwide is a multi-strata agroforestry systems, which is called a home garden. And in this home garden, people here, in this case from Mexico, from Atotonilco, Mexico, where we have been working with our collaborators for a long time, they're using agroforestry techniques that include the residue management, ash deposition. They enhance nutrient recycling, conservation. They maintain high species diversity, as you can see here in the home gardens, many species, including the home garden. They know what are the adequate tree species, their management. They know how to time the irrigation of their sites, how to time pruning, how to add the ash to the soil when it's needed. They use composting, vermiculture, or use of earthworms, as you can see in these slides. You can see people from El Salvador here using residues from the garden for composting. Then you can see people from Costa Rica. You see vermiculture there. So they know, they have the knowledge and they practice those systems, but many of these communities, in spite of that, they remain marginalized often. The poverty and resource degradation prevail. Here I'm actually bringing you an extreme of resource degradation and marginalized conditions in Haiti, where the energy needs are so pressing that's very difficult to carry on any agroforestry work, although there are many good examples from there, but still poverty prevails. So how can agroforestry contribute to perhaps improve these conditions? As you know, last year, in September of 2015, the United Nations General Assembly in New York came along with a total of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And they're supposed to guide the international work in what relates to rural development and the environment in this decade. The goals bring together all kinds of development concepts that are based on economic, social, political, technological, ecological perspectives. But then what happens if you look at the needs of if you want to support the increasing population of the world, the sum of the area which is needed for the different sustainable development goals, if you think about current production levels for agriculture, the sum of the area needed exceeds what's available on the globe. If you're only thinking about monoculture, so that's an interesting calculation that Van Nordvik, one of our colleagues from CIFOR, from ICRAF and CIFOR, published in one of his most recent CIFOR policy papers. And then the idea is, because you have agroforestry as an alternative, agroforestry, when you are mixing the appropriate combination of trees, crops, and livestock, they can offer a range of goods, benefits, and services at the same time, providing food, renewable energy, clean water, while at the same time conserving biodiversity. Because, as you know, when properly implemented, agroforestry as a multifunctional land use it can have land equivalent ratios of greater than 1, meaning that the yields of different crops in agroforestry will be greater than if planted individually in monocultures in different lots. That way, agroforestry can support sustainable intensification. But how can agroforestry do it? Well, to contribute to sustainable goal number 2, which is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, promote sustainable agriculture, agroforestry should, for one thing, first of all, meet the immediate economic needs of the farmers, increase their net present value. It should integrate into the prevalent production systems that exist in a certain area, such as agriculture, cattle raising. They should improve or at least not worsen the current environmental conditions of the locations, the landscapes where it's being practiced. They should consider issues of land tenure and land security. They should use true participatory approaches in planning and executing the different projects. And they should integrate traditional with more modern scientific technical knowledge. You can see here some slides where some of the systems I'm showing are traditional systems, like this system to the left of yerba mate. The farmers are talking here with the technical personnel, and some of the systems have been improved. We'll show you that briefly. Some systems are very traditional, like this traditional multi-strata home garden, but then some systems are responding to technical innovations like this soil cover with arachis and some other designs that have improved based on technical information. Agroforestry has to make use, the key of a well-designed agroforestry is to make use of appropriate tree species, which include then what's called multi-purpose trees and shrubs. And those species have to have a series of conditions, which are in all biomass productivity, high survival capacity, resilience. They have to be easy to establish, manage, maintain in the land. They have to have a good shape, good growth shape. You have to be able to coppice or prune in the different trees. They have to have good intercropping potential with the food crops or other crops, medicinal crops or other uses that are needed. For fuel wood, they have to have high density, high caloric wood. They may provide non-timber forest products. And of course, they have to have local acceptance. Nitrogen fixing ability is important to improve site conditions, resistance to grazing, and likely to become invasive. And now today, in the face of carbon markets and red projects, carbon capture is a good advantage as well. What are some major obstacles that agroforestry faces today in rural areas of many developing countries? And I have seen this through my evaluations. Often you can see agroforestry systems established someplace, but cattle is roaming free without proper fencing. I saw this recently visiting Ethiopia, where beef cattle was roaming freely and producing certain damage to the crops, and people were trying to implement community fencing. This picture is actually from Haiti, and you see a goat climbing a tree. Difficulties in community organization. If you don't have people who are properly organized in cooperatives or other groups in ejidos in Mexico, it's very difficult to get them involved in the type of projects that you'd like to promote. Deficient infrastructure is something that's so frequent. I saw it very often in many countries of Africa, in Ethiopia, in Rwanda. You can see here in Haiti trying to go on some roads that are totally impossible. Situations of environmental degradation, as you see here, these hills that have been totally denuded. It's very difficult to start any projects if you have to start, number one, to improve the conditions by doing some restoration first. Pressing energy needs, as we mentioned earlier for Haiti, if people are so needy of fuel, it's very difficult that they will let the trees grow to the sizes that you need for the agroforestry projects. And probably number one should be lack of proper funding for agroforestry activities, or the funds don't go all the way to the places where they should be used. They stay being used for other purposes. That's a major thing, as you know. Well, there are many international entities. We mentioned the Forestry and Agroforestry, the FTA program of the CGIAR as a good example, and I'm going to show you some of their projects. And many non-government organizations, academic institutions such as Yale, many other academic institutions around the world, many other entities are conducting what's called research for development, which is geared then to decreasing rural poverty and hunger while maintaining landscape integrity and ecosystem services. These are some examples from Sulawesi, where you see watersheds. These are our group of researchers. Now there are some people from Latin America here. So what are the challenges that these projects face? The challenges that they face is, first, how can we integrate the traditional knowledge of the smallholders that are already perhaps practicing sustainable systems with the scientific knowledge that we may have from academic institutions and others on environmental and agricultural strategies to be able to promote the most suitable agroforestry system for each situation. Another thing is why some of these development projects may fail or not reach their goals to the expected goals. It's because sometimes the farmers are not getting the right financial benefits from their system. So how can we remove barriers for smallholders to access the markets for their trees and other agroforestry products that would allow them to capture more of their value, especially for people who are socially or economically marginalized, including women in many cases? What type of products and markets are the most suitable? What could be the interventions that are most cost effective to realize these outcomes? So we are going to show you first examples of a recent project that we just finalized with colleagues from the National University of Misiones in Argentina. Our project was called Integration of Indigenous Ecological Knowledge with Scientific Knowledge as Tools for Sustainable Development. And we summarized a series of experiences from Latin America and from around the world, where marketing of indigenous non-timber agroforestry products was done. And that way, the indigenous non-timber agroforestry products were integrated to the local economy, but with the assistance of technical and scientific personnel. We're going to tell you then about organic yerba mate from Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. We're going to tell you next about the guayusa from Napo, from Ecuador, and we're going to tell you also about wild and cultivated cacao from Bolivia and from El Salvador. Yerba mate is a very lucrative business in Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. It has a large market expanding to the USA, Europe, and Asia because of the high antioxidant content and its effect as a stimulant. These are the words that the people from Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, they use for drinking mate, putting the loose leaves in the bottom and sucking from this little straw. And these are the yerba mate leaves. That's how the yerba mate looks. Argentina is the most important producer with about 200,000 hectares total, mostly in the province of Misiones. Misiones is part of what's called the interior Mata Atlantica or Atlantic forest, which encompasses some areas of Brazil. As you know, it's one of the most endangered forests of the world. And in Argentina, the interior Atlantic forest is an area of mega diversity. It also contains the Misiones, and this area where yerba mate is grown contains the Iguazu Falls in the Iguazu National Park and some areas of important cultural heritage because the Jesuitic missions were founded there. Some ruins there are visited, and they are part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site today. Here you have yerba mate leaves, and you see how yerba mate is currently grown in a conventional manner using modern techniques as a monoculture. But it grows in subtropical forests as a small understory tree. It may be up to 15 meters tall, so it can grow under the shade of other trees and therefore it can be grown perfectly in agroforestry systems. In a conventional system such as the one you see here, it's usually kept at 2 to 3 meters tall because they harvest the branches and leaves. But the monocultures can result in something like what you see in this picture. You see all the soil erosion in between the lines, soil exhaustion, but yerba mate agroforestry systems can be an alternative. Much of this research we published here in the reference that's at the bottom of the slide, so I can offer to send you a PDF if you ask me through an email. Organic yerba mate agroforestry then, especially when it's organic, incorporates trees into the yerba mate plantation, adding diversity of products. It adds ecosystem services such as carbon, biodiversity. And the trees improve the microenvironment. That way the yerba mate is protected from the excess sun, the wind, the frost. It's a subtropical forest, so occasionally there is a frost. And it can maintain the productivity without chemical inputs. Therefore, it favors organic practices. And the most important thing, the organic yerba mate producers can get a substantial price increase from their products. Here you see the yerba mate in agroforestry system with the nitrogen-fixing tree, which is the timbo, and I will show you some results of our research using this species. In Argentina and Paraguay and Brazil, there are southern Brazil, there are several private companies that buy organic yerba mate leaves from their farmers associated with them. One of the most important, and probably you have seen the products in the supermarket, is Guayaki. Guayaki was started in 1996, so it's one of the oldest private companies that has marketed the organic yerba mate worldwide. Here you have a yerba mate producer that's associated with Guayaki. You see he's growing yerba mate with native trees in his field. They vary in size. The yerba mate farms can be generally small when they are organic in general. They don't use herbicides or any other agrochemicals. They use things like this roller to roll down the weeds, so they don't need to combat the weeds with an herbicide. The Guayaki company produces their own seedlings of yerba mate and also native trees to give to the farmers to grow in their yerba mate agroforestry systems. And the farmers who sell their yerba mate to Guayaki, they get 2 to 3 times higher prices for their yerba mate than selling in conventional markets. Another interesting thing is that Guayaki buys also yerba mate from indigenous people who grow yerba mate in their forest. The yerba mate is naturally in their forest, like in this case, where the Ache Guayaki, which is an indigenous group of Guarani ethnia, they live in Paraguay in a 5,000 hectare forest. This reserve borders with the Maracaju Reserve, which is 100,000 hectares. And they have natural yerba mate in their forest, and also they plant yerba mate in the understory. They enrich their forest with yerba mate. Guayaki buys their yerba mate, and it also pays the tribe an annual fee for the use of their name as their brand. Guayaki also buys yerba mate from farmers in Santa Catarina in Brazil. There are many other brands that sell yerba mate, organic yerba mate in Argentina and worldwide, like Kraus. Kraus is a family enterprise. They use a novel system for drying their yerba mate without smoke, which is important, especially in European markets. They commercialize their yerba mate through Ecoteas, and you have the website of Ecoteas. You can find Ecoteas in supermarkets in the US and other parts of the world. Roapipo is another enterprise, also in Misiones. It's a family enterprise. They have yerba mate growing in agroforestry systems with important timber species, native timber species like Cordia trichotomas, very high value. They process and market their own yerba mate in their site. They have their own nurseries. They also have a forest reserve. They bring tourists to their forest reserve. And yerba mate is also grown organically by small farmers. Some of them are indigenous peoples, like this cooperative, Wisdom Montoya. They sell their yerba mate as certified yerba mate, certified by ArgentCert, a local certifying agency. The interesting thing is that because most of this yerba mate, Guayaquil, Ecotis, Kraus, Ruiz de Montoya, etc., they are certified. Organic certification allows the companies to sell the export products at several times the price of conventional products. And look at the variety of products that Guayaquil produces, yerba mate in tea bags, loose yerba mate, and also energy drinks of yerba mate, prepared with yerba mate. This is a study we did a few years back in October 2010. You can see there the price in the supermarket per 1,000 grams. So if you look at the last column to the right, the price per kilo of the different products. And you see when it's organic, like the Guayaquil, the Mate Factor, Wisdom of the Ancients, another brand, their price per 1,000 grams ranges from 20 to 100. And while the price for loose conventional yerba mate is only like $4, $5, today it's a little bit more, it's probably twice that price. But still the difference between the conventional yerba mate and the organic yerba mate is very high, several times high. These are some of the useful native trees that people use in Argentina for growing organic yerba mate, tabebuya, which is a very good timber tree, and Pterolobium contorticilicum, that's the timbo tree that was mentioning to you before, a nitrogen-fixing tree that improves the soil. Some trees that are very excellent timber, like guatambu. So some of our studies then included this species to study how yerba mate agroforestry systems improve soil nutrients. And in this case, you have here a general view of the experimental site. You see the yerba mate plantation, and then for comparison, we sample soils in a forest nearby and also in a degraded area where nothing was growing just before the experiments were started. If you examine the nutrient composition of the soil on the topsoil, 0 to 10 centimeters, organic matter, total nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium. Before we established the yerba mate agroforestry, then compare with the yerba mate monoculture, then yerba mate with one of the 3 species, yerba mate with another 3 species, and yerba mate with the 2 species together. And if you want more detail about that, I can send you the PDF of the reference that's at the bottom of the table. The interesting thing is that you can also perceive the benefits of growing the yerba mate with the trees, not only from the results of the table, but here you can see them visually. You can see that the person here is holding a bunch of yerba mate, which, as you look at it, is yellowish, in comparison with the yerba mate next to it, which is growing under this big tree. So the more yellowish yerba mate was taken from an agroforestry system where the main trees were eucalypts that were not benefiting the soil that much, while the greener yerba mate is growing under timbo. So you see there how the timbo has been able to improve the conditions of the agroforestry system. So you see then that the agroforestry systems of yerba mate produce products that are important for the local farmers because of the added value of being organic, and they also improve the environmental conditions of the sites where they are growing. So I'm going to tell you now about another type of yerba mate, which is the guayusa, Ilex guayusa. It's the same genera of yerba mate, Ilex paraguayensis. Here is Ilex guayusa from Napo, Ecuador. I have been advising the Runa company for several years. Runa is a social enterprise. It was started in 2010 by a Yale graduate. They created a new value chain for several agroforestry products grown by the indigenous people of Napo, Ecuador. Their most successful product is the guayusa. They use other products as well in agroforestry, cinnamon and others. But the most important product so far has been guayusa. It's native to the northwestern Amazon. It also occurs in Peru. Traditionally, the people in the indigenous communities, you see their houses here. This is one of the indigenous communities we were visiting. They're called Quichua people in Napo, in Ecuador. They harvested, you see the person harvesting the leaves there, and they prepare a very stimulating drink. They consume it very early in the morning, every day before they go to work. They call it the Guayusa ceremony. Because of the high levels of caffeine and antioxidants, similar to the yerba mate, the guayusa leaves are used as a natural stimulant, and the guayusa today is it's still present in the Amazonian culture of northeastern Ecuador and Peru, and it's sold in over 12,000 stores in the US, in Canada, and in Ecuador. Through their research program, which I am advising, their participatory research program, RUNA, what's doing is to focus on the domestication process of the guayusa for the growth in agroforestry system based on the traditional chakra system. For example, you can see here one of the indigenous people who works directly with RUNA, Silveiro. He's a Quichua farmer. He has his own experimental studies in his own farm. He has his own nursery. And the creation of the guayusa value chain supports the sustenance of the local livelihoods and the conservation of natural resources as well, because they based their indigenous, they use the indigenous systems that the farmers are practicing today to develop new types, new ways of growing the guayusa. To respond to the increasing demand of guayusa, they need to plant the guayusa in agroforestry systems. But the way the agroforestry systems are being designed is based on the way the indigenous people are growing guayusa. Some results from 2010 and 2012, about 150 guayusa plants were produced by the approximately 750 farmer families associated with guayusa. The economic values, the economic benefits that the farmers obtain are very important to maintain the interest of farmers in participating in their initiatives. Before they started working with RUNA, the average income of farmers was about only $50 a month, and the average farmer family income in about 2 years improved by 8%. We hope it has improved a little bit more right now. Here you can see some of the RUNA facilities for research. That's the guayusa plant on the left side. Some of their researchers, Elliot, the creator of RUNA, along with some of his partners in business, and some of the installations of RUNA in Napo, in Archidona, and their own nurseries as well. Through their research program, RUNA has developed a handbook for growing agroforestry systems of guayusa. You can see here this is what a page illustrating the design of the agroforestry system, and a table here to the left showing calculations of financial returns on year 1, year 2, year 5, year 15, etc. These are some of the species that we are using to combine with guayusa to create the agroforestry systems with guayusa, which are based, as I said before, on the indigenous agroforestry systems as people practice them in their chakras. You see, we're promoting the use of tabebuya, again, a very good timber tree, cordia, cedrela, cedar, excellent tree, excellent timber. Oh. I'm sorry, I can't move the slide. Something happened with my computer.
Let's see, you want to advance the slide here? I'll advance
okay.
there. Yeah.
Here it is. No, here. I lost the arrows momentarily. Sorry about that. Okay, so we told you then about yerba mate and about guayusa. So now we're going to close this part talking about wild and cultivated cacao in Bolivia, And in other parts of Central America, Latin America, there are interesting value chains of wild and cultivated cacao. And we studied some value chains for communities in the Amazon of northern Bolivia, which collected wild cacao and also planted cacao in their forest. They used dried seed and cocoa paste, and they sold their chocolate. They're selling their chocolate today to formal chocolate processors in national markets and for export. But then some of it, of course, is consumed totally. And the interesting thing is that this activity contributes substantially to farmers' income. But the most interesting thing is that in France, recently, a panel of international experts recently selected 50 cocoa products, which included 3 that came from these communities. So following that success, the Swiss Intercooperation, the Helveta Swiss Intercooperation Institution, and the Wildlife Conservation Society started to provide technical assistance and support to strengthen the value chain for quality cocoa to these communities. So that's very interesting, how this success then encouraged the international community to support these communities and these projects. In El Salvador, recently I learned there is the so-called Cacao Alliance. It's seeking to position the country of El Salvador as an exclusive origin for high-quality cacao. So again, that's another interesting example of how a permanent crop in agroforestry is helping the local farmers with their indigenous projects, adding value through the supply chain. So now I'm going to tell you a few examples of rural development projects by the Forestries and Agroforestry program of the CGIAR. They all use innovative extension approaches to foster entrepreneurship and innovation by the local people. The projects, again, use existing knowledge and technologies of agroforestry and other sustainable agricultural approaches, as well as new technologies that are developed by their institutions according to the new circumstances. Here we're showing some examples from Cameroon and from Ethiopia, and we're going to tell you some details in a few seconds. One of the projects that I thought would be interesting to illustrate these points is what's called Trees for Food Security. The long name for the project is Improving Sustainable Productivity of Farming Systems and Enhanced Livelihoods through Adoption of Evergreen Agriculture in Eastern Africa. It's still running, 2012 to 2016, about $6 million. They're currently seeking more funding through ACR, the Australian International Development Office. They're active in Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi. They work on scaling up agroforestry to increase agricultural production and maintain environmental services. They focus on smallholders. They use multiple purpose trees such as Calliandra, Leucaena, Gliricidia to increase fertility and support agriculture. That's what is called evergreen agriculture. They try to use their approaches in a number of different options, from drylands such as in Malcasa in Ethiopia, to more humid areas such as in Rwanda, also some in Ethiopia. Here you can see some of the projects that we visited. Farmers are proudly showing their fertilizer trees, as they call them. Here is some Calliandra. This farmer is feeding the Calliandra to his cattle. Some of the impacts and outcomes of the project have been the establishment of rural resource centers. They have established 2 rural resource centers in Rwanda, 2 in Ethiopia, 1 in Uganda. They have established nurseries to enhance training and supply of improved tree germplasm. The rural resource centers also provide business opportunities for farmer groups through grafted fruit trees. They have also increased a lot their understanding of tree-crop interactions through several trials that they have done in farmer fields. About 5,000 farmers have been involved in those trials. They also have a very active program of capacity development, all kinds of workshops and other capacity development activities. Through the project, they have distributed about 2 million tree seedlings, and the farmers, extension workers, the policymakers have increased their understanding of the role of trees, especially on on-farm trials. If you want to know more about that, the website is right there, or I can provide you more details about the project. Another interesting project from FTA that illustrates these points is the one called Tree Crops Development in Africa and Asia to Benefit the Poor. It ran from 2012 to 2014 with more than $2 million, but currently still operating, although with limited funds. It operates in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Mali, also in India. It's based mostly on getting a transition of the smallholder farming to more business-oriented, semi-commercial farming based on fruits, nuts, and oil. They have 3 components: Alamblakia, domestication. You know Alamblakia, the seeds produce oil, which is used for commercial purposes for food. Unilever is the main buyer of those seeds. Another project called Fruit Africa, mostly focusing on fruits, some of the fruits you had never seen before, very novel fruits they're trying to commercialize, and another project on biofuels. In Eastern Africa and also in West and Central Africa, the project works again with the rural resource centers for dissemination of the agroforestry innovations, including fruits and nut trees. You can see some of the farmers with their own nurseries there, some of the agroforestry systems, very complex agroforestry systems with fruit trees, and the farmer proudly showing their fruit trees to us. Here you see some of the rural resource centers like Apader. They're very important. They gather the farmers in these associations, are very active. You can see the farmer here with his own nursery and selling the products in the local markets. And finally, I'm going to show to you just briefly the project called AG4 or AG4 Sulawesi, Agroforestry and Forestry in Sulawesi, linking knowledge with action. Sulawesi is one of the largest islands of Indonesia. It's characterized for having had the extensive migration of people from here to there, according to development programs that not always did the best for the people. So AG4 Sulawesi started in 2011 and is still active with more than $9 million. It's trying to compensate for those things, giving assistance to the underprivileged female and male farmers to help them enhance their livelihoods through establishment of agroforestry, engagement in social forestry mechanisms. The overall objective is to enhance agroforestry and forestry livelihood systems of rural communities. You can see here the whole team, Jim Rochetko, the project leader, and some of the difficult situations here in Sulawesi, the hills, the systems there in monocultures, the erosion, and AG4 tries to respond then to the needs of the local and the migrant communities. For example, in the past, cacao was promoted as a monoculture, but the monocultures of cacao have decreased yields substantially in recent years due to the increase in pests and diseases, losses of soil fertility. So AG4 is trying to promote the cultivation of agroforestry systems to increase diversity, reduce the risk of monoculture production, diversify production and income. You see some of their houses, and then these are some of their nurseries producing some novel species and the very complex agroforestry systems that now are being practiced with cacao. AG4 Sulawesi has 3 components: livelihoods, governance, and environment. And you can see here the team again, and many of their projects are focused on the environmental services, especially the water. The water is very important because they need their water for irrigation of their rice fields. And the project has attained many important goals. More than 25,000 individuals have been instructed on sustainable agriculture. They have created more than 155 group nurseries, individual nurseries as well, produced more than 1 million seedlings, models of participatory governance, environmental service schemes, district livelihood conservation strategies, and a number of other achievements as well. Okay, so from everything we have talked about, we may conclude that agroforestry can, if we have the appropriate combination of trees, crops, and livestock, offer a range of goods, benefits, services at the same time, providing food, renewable energy when needed, clean water, as we talked about in Sulawesi, while at the same time conserving biodiversity and other ecosystem services. Many of the agroforestry products have several ecological and economic advantages, as we showed to you, and they can contribute to farm financial stability and viability, as we showed you for the yerba mate, for the cacao, for the guayusa. But then other components of the agroforestry systems like tree, herbs, or shrub species, which add fruit, medicinal or ornamental value, and then they increase farm diversification, they decrease risk, and they increase variety of income. Indigenous agroforestry, as we can see, then can be brought into alignment with integrative landscape management strategies, incorporating supply chains based on sustainable management of agroforestry that generate income from a variety of species. We have shown then a few examples of indigenous communities that have been able to reach local or international markets for their products. The technical and scientific knowledge that we can provide to them from academic institutions and other centers of research can be instrumental for looking at the medicinal, nutritional, or other use values of the specific products. Also on the different steps on the value chain that they need to attain to reach the key markets for their products. This may involve the mechanisms to add value, like, for example, certification, as we were telling you about, to get better financial returns, or other aspects like processing, packaging, branding, advertising for their products. And then finally, if we think about all these projects, we can think, okay, there are many successes that sometimes happen in localized situations. Most of the projects that I've shown to you could be considered successful case studies, but the key issue for the project is scaling up so they can reach a broader range of environmental conditions, socioeconomic situations that can vary across the regions. I have seen through my studies and my travels around the world that socioeconomic and ecological conditions are the most important determinants. Sometimes when you have conditions of extreme poverty, as we have seen in Haiti or Ethiopia, environmental degradation, the chances of success are much lower than if you are in more favorable conditions, such as in Misiones or in Brazil or in Paraguay. And then we can ask ourselves questions like, how much are the farmers really improving their livelihoods? Are they getting a fair price for their products? We've seen that, for example, the farmers may get 2 to 3 times higher price for their organic yerba mate, but the difference between conventional and organic yerba mate in the market at the consumer end is much higher than that. So are they getting a fair price? Are the funds from the different development projects really directed to empower the farmers to improve production, working conditions? Are the impact assessments really reflecting those true conditions? So I think we still face many challenges, and we can still ask ourselves those questions. I think we do have the correct framework to answer those questions, but we need to keep working to face these challenges. So this is all I had to offer to you today. Let me point to you the title of the book we're writing today with several of my colleagues. It's called Integrated Landscapes, Agroforestry for Biodiversity Conservation and Food Sovereignty. It will be published by Springer in the series Advances in Agroforestry. Down here you see my my email and other ways to reach me in case you need more information after we are done with the questions. And this closing slide is a brochure of the book that we published last year with a series of collaborators from Latin America. And down here you can see the way to download the book for free. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I'll be ready to answer any questions if we have time for that.
Well, thank you very much, Florencia. Yes, we do have some time for questions. I'm going to open up a Q&A box here. Just one second, please. I'll open up a Q&A box. And so for participants, please, you'll notice at the bottom of the Q&A box, there should be a dialogue box that you can type in your questions. So Florence, it may take a few minutes for some of those questions to come in, and I'll help steer them or review them and steer them to you. So while we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, again, thank you for a very rich and comprehensive presentation there. It seems there's a lot of hope and progress, but as you listed in the end, a lot of challenges that seems that we have the right framework, that these systems offer, agroforestry systems offer a lot of potential, but scaling up and securing more widespread adoption, a lot of challenges. I guess, maybe playing a devil's advocate here, or I'm thinking that some of the questions that may be raised or about, can agroforestry systems really help us achieve the SDG goals, especially around hunger and food security, that the argument would come in that, well, that we really need to focus on scale and production of calories and maximizing output of food to ensure food security and improve nutrition. And, can these or other types of agroforestry systems, while we've seen in the current presentation that they're giving a great contribution to livelihoods and a lot of better environmental performance, but how do we, convince that at scale, these or other agroforestry systems can really produce the needed calories and food production to ensure food security and nutrition?
Yeah, I think you said it quite right, Gregory. You summarized it quite right. Sometimes I think, yes, the farmers through agroforestry are probably eating better, and when I visit those projects, I can see they are happy and they are the model farmer, coached by the project, perhaps. So this farmer is getting lots of attention from the project personnel. So you see the farmer is happier and the farmer is eating better, but the farmer is still poor. Or maybe the farmer is still not able to do things that probably he or she would be aspiring to. So we are not taking the person out of poverty yet. So that's one of the challenges. And these international programs, they have what's called the theory of change. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the theory of change. And they have to say what the goals are, and they have to show how the project is going to try to reach those goals. So that's where we're heading, and hopefully some of the examples that I showed to you do show some impacts that are substantial, but we need much more than that. So how do we do here? I see two questions. Do I type or do I answer? Yeah, I see them on the screen by Leslie Byrne, or do I answer them orally, or what do I do with them?
Perhaps I'll read them out to you. So I'm not sure that all of the participants can see the questions as they come in. So I'll read the question out to you, and then I can be reviewing them as they come in while you're addressing a question. So let's start with this first question from Leslie Byrne. Okay. And she asks, you spoke about new ways are being introduced into existing indigenous knowledge in Runa. What new ways are being introduced? That's the question from Leslie Byrne.
Yeah, the ways is how to grow their guayusa in a larger scale. The farmers are very willing to sell guayusa, and people come to buy their guayusa. but they don't have enough. So the farmers are already planting guayusa in their farms, but many of them are planting them as monocultures. So the new ways are that we're telling them designs, for example, planting distances and species to plant. We want to make a multi-strata agroforestry system. So taking the models that they have themselves, we're telling them what new species they can plant. They all have some additional piece of land where they can plant more guayusa. So we are telling them how to clean the land, how to clear the land in the best ways possible, how to recycle the nutrients from the slash, planting distances and planting species that perhaps none of them are exotic. We're all only focusing on native species, but they are taking all this advice from us, and the handbook for growing guayusa, it's been produced by them, by themselves. It's been a very interactive process, very, I would say, a true participatory process between the farmers and the technical personnel at home.
Yes, I think to some degree you've also answered Leslie's second question, where commented another comment, because I work extensively overseas in the challenge of our Western approach, trying to bring new ways of thinking to indigenous cultures or to existing relationships between tribes that are not apparent unless you are from the country. We need to have a long-term approach. How is this achieved? I think you just addressed some of that. And Badega Bishaw also asked a question that's related to that. He asked, could you speak a bit about integrating traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge, as was presented in the early part of your presentation?
Right, yeah. A little bit continuing on Leslie's discussion. We're making the point of not introducing things that are totally new to the people. It's the same rationale that Katie has used for many, many years. You don't want to bring a new system, you want to improve the existing system. And farmers are willing to take on that. We see that every day internationally, not only where Katie works or where Runa works, worldwide. We see that farmers are willing to take on the advice, and they ask for the details that we're talking about, different species that they never thought about doing this or doing that, pruning. There are so many details to managing plants and plant interactions. So I think that's part of it. But then connected with that, how to integrate indigenous with scientific knowledge. I think a very good example is the project that tries to improve the systems in Africa. One of the projects of FTA would be a very good example, because they have three components. Remember, Alamblachia, then the other component was Fruit Africa and biofuels. In Fruit Africa, which was the project that I examined the most because it was so interesting, many farmers in Cameroon that we visited grow several fruit crops in their backyards, and they're fruit trees, and they just take the fruit from the tree. But they don't do anything with it except for their own consumption. So what the project has done is made a survey of all those fruit species, taken the fruits and then taken them to the laboratories, analyzed their chemical composition, their nutritional value. They have done even genetic studies, and now they can say, okay, this fruit is very nutritious because of this and this and that. So then they encourage the farmer to grow those trees, first establishing nurseries. But then, it's not that easy to establish a nursery. You need to know the domestication of species is a very difficult point. So to bring a tree from the forest or from the backyard to an area where you can plant it and harvest fruits for selling them to markets, that's very difficult. So again, here comes the academic personnel, the scientific knowledge, with the trials that you can do on farm or on station and see planting distances, what are the best varieties through genetic studies. There are all kinds of studies like that. And then many studies like how to market the products, how to best advertise for the products, what markets to reach. Some of the projects are encouraging the farmers to form cooperatives. Where do they sell their products? Those are things that the scientific or technical knowledge is contributing to the indigenous knowledge. So the indigenous knowledge is consists on they have those fruits, they like them, they're good, they think they're nutritious. Well, here comes then the scientific knowledge, the chemical analysis, the nutritional analysis, the market analysis, reaching the markets, all those aspects are, the contribution is that. In the case of the yerba mate, for example, the most important contribution perhaps is the certification. The organic certification cannot be done by an individual farmer. We have seen examples of an indigenous farmer who wants to sell their organic yerba mate, and it's perfectly organic, it's perfectly good, but they don't have the capacity to certify their own products. Certification is expensive. So what do? They associate with another farmer who is, has a little bit better means, and that other farmer is bringing a certifier to his farm. So then this other farmer can get certified through this other farmer as well. So, for example, certification schemes are things that are developed by technical personnel, scientific personnel, and then they can reach the individual farmer. So the local knowledge there is how to grow the yerba mate, how to grow it in an organic way. And then the technical knowledge there is how to certify the yerba mate, how to bring it to the market. I think those examples answer that question.
Thanks, Florencia. I think I'm going to turn now the attention to a couple of questions from Novianas Efrat. He's writing from Indonesia. And he's really wondering about the challenges that make some of these agroforestry systems only provide, in his words, a small or little development in the financial factor. He's citing the example of the 8% increase from the presentation, 8% increase in 6 years. And so just asking about what are the factors that might limit improvement in financial returns. And then goes on to ask, perhaps from the examples from Sulawesi, is there any research about the impact of the agroforestry systems on the farmers' financial conditions in that context in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think that's the core of the issue, especially the last slide in the conclusions. If I was saying if the funds that are being used, are they really empowering the farmers? Yes, that goes to the bottom of everything. I think many development projects use enormous amounts of money, and you don't really know how to account for every piece of money and if they are truly achieving their goals. I think 8% in 6 years is very low, and considering the amount of considering the sales of the Guayusa products, one would need to do a more detailed analysis to be able to see why the farmer is getting such a low piece of the pie. And perhaps because when you're at the local level, it seems that that's a fair price. When you buy something, you say so much per kilogram of leaves. They were getting before $1 and now they're getting $5, so that's a lot, and the increase seems to be a lot. But then how much do they sell? So, but then there goes the supply chain, and then it keeps the market, keeps adding more complications to it, because now you need to process the leaves, you have to dry them, and then you have to grind them and put it in a tea bag, and then you have to put it in a nice and attractive little box, and then the box has to be exported from Ecuador, and it reaches the US, and in all that, the process keeps adding and adding and adding, and there are intermediaries, and it's incredible. We have followed it. I didn't mention it in the seminar, but we did a study with acai. years ago. And then now we have a chapter in the book on acai, which is touching exactly the same question. Starting from the acai, you pay for the acai, and it's the farmer experiences two, three times the normal price. So that's great. But how much can the farmer sell to be able to increase their income substantially? So it's a matter of scale there. And then when you go to the market, the price of the acai, when you go to a local store, will be $17 for a bottle of acai juice, which is ridiculous in comparison with what the farmer is getting. So that's an incredible, difficult issue, but to me it's a matter of scale. It's not just buying raw products from the farmer. In some of the projects in Africa, the key is the local added value when people process the products themselves. We saw it with shea butter in Cameroon and other products, where then the value added is there. So that's the key. If people from the development projects can be smart enough so that they empower the farmers to process the products locally and get much more of the added value themselves. And the added value doesn't stay in the intermediaries, which was the case that we found for the acai products in Brazil. I'm not sure I answered the whole question because that's a very difficult subject. I think you need to go product by product and try to be like a detective and see where the money goes. And for the farmer, it's a matter of scale. As people say, you will never get rich by selling boxes of matches. How many boxes of matches you have to sell to increase your income? So it's a matter of scale.
Many challenges remain to really impact livelihoods and income substantially. It's a kind of related question here from Meredith Fort related to some of the things you were just talking about. And she asked, how important would you say it is to have internationally marketable versus locally consumed products in agroforestry systems to be able to bring them to scale?
Yeah, both. You need them both, definitely. Yeah. It's incredible in the case of the acai. Acai for years only had a local market, and it stayed there, just being sold around Belém in Brazil. And now acai, you find it in the supermarkets. Both are important, definitely, because it calls the attention on the product. In the case of the Alamblachia, for example, Unilever is the biggest marketer of food products worldwide, and there is not enough Alamblachia to satisfy the demand. So that can bring a real change of scale. When a product goes to the international market and then the attention is brought on the product, then that can really bring a change, I think.
Great. On this topic of promoting agroforestry systems and adoption, we're talking mostly in this presentation about small farmers. A question asked, changing gear here, a question asked by Gustavo Segura, how do you recommend to promote agroforestry systems with large-scale farmers?
Well, that's been done in Misiones in Argentina. The INTA, the National Institute for Agricultural Technology, they work mostly with medium to large farmers for promoting silvopastoral systems. And they see the silvopastoral systems in this case, they're very sophisticated. The large farmers, the big farmers, look at numbers and they see agroforestry as a way to diversify their portfolio and minimize risk. For them, the agroforestry system makes a lot of sense because they see the cattle, the cows, as their petty cash. The everyday money will be coming from the cows. You can always sell the cattle. And the trees will be their savings. So for them, it's a perfect portfolio. So that's the way to promote agroforestry systems with the big farmers. You need to get the numbers, and the people who work for the INTA, at the INTA there in Misiones in Argentina, they made those numbers. So in the book that I showed in the very last slide, it's an agroforestry book published in Spanish. There is financial analysis of these silvopastoral systems, and the financial analysis contemplate everything, the cost and all the different techniques, and that's what the big farmers, that's your terminology, understand the most. And when I go there and I tell them, oh, I see that your silvopastoral systems are very nice. Technically, they're very advanced. They also enjoy the most advanced technologies. So, for example, these silvopastoral systems that I'm telling you about, they're based on selected species, Pinus teda or loblolly pine, and they're hybrid species. The trees grow perfectly straight up. The pastures are hybrid grasses that are brought from Brazil, and the cattle are also hybrids. They're Bradford, which are a hybrid from Brahma, and Hereford or Brangus, which are a hybrid of Brahma and Angus beef cattle. So they want all the highest technology possible, and they want the systems that they can manage. So when I'm talking to them and I'm saying, oh yeah, it's very nice that you have trees and cattle, but it would be nice if you also had some native trees. They say, oh no, I already have enough trouble with one tree species. I can't add another one. But little by little, they are adding more tree species to their systems as well. So, and then talking about the environmental aspects, perhaps one can tell them the broadest environmental aspects. Perhaps one can tell them about carbon sequestration or perhaps about water, but they wouldn't be very interested in enhancing biodiversity, for example, in my experience. So I think if you want to promote agroforestry systems among big farmers, which is your question, I think you need to have the financial aspects of the projects very clear and to be able to show them, and then talk about the investment and talk about risk, diversifying and your investment and decreasing risk.
Thank you, Florencia. A somewhat related question on some of the challenges in promotion and promoting adoption of agroforestry systems. Kanya Rahayu writes and asks, how do you convince farmers to use agroforestry systems and move away from monoculture systems, and how to provide some kind of temporary income before the agroforestry systems are maturing and beginning to produce products, become established and produce, because some of these take quite a long time to become established and stable.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that, for example, in Sulawesi, the most convincing point was the pests and diseases of the cacao. You know that cacao suffers from many pests and diseases, fungal diseases, all kinds. And it was very clear that in an agroforestry system, they wouldn't suffer as much from those problems. So in this case, it was like an obvious answer. And then, as I was telling you, before when I was answering Gustavo's question about promoting agroforestry with big farmers, talking about the risk, that's a very good argument when you're saying that if you have 2 or more crops in your field, you're defending yourself against risk of all kinds of market risks, weather-related risk, all kinds of things. And then things that people can see on their own, if they can appreciate things that they can see on their own, in their own fields. But of course, you don't want to convince people. You want for them to see on their own and see if they adopt that, because they see the obvious benefits of associating the species. It's very difficult at the very beginning, of course, because some of the agroforestry systems need quite a lot of time to start producing. But the systems that include animals or the home gardens start giving products from the very start. Animals, all kinds of animals. I'm not talking about cattle. I'm talking about all the animals that can be grown in a home garden, from rabbits to birds, chickens, and the animals are there from day one. And that's why many people, many farmers who are a little bit reluctant to adopt mixed production systems, they do adopt them when they include animals that they know they can sell. So animals are a very good way for starting. And then all kinds of products that can be grown in a home garden. A home garden can produce in the very first couple of years. So those are products that can be obtained from the very beginning. But of course, that's why the Taungia system is there when people intercrop annual crops in between rows of trees because it helps them with subsistence needs while the trees are growing. So annual crops and animals, that would be the way to solve the issue of the initial investment.
Thank you. Well, perhaps we'll wrap up shortly. If Florencia, if you up to you if you care to. There's two other questions. One from Abigail Smith about knowledge gaps and research for the future, and from Joseph Todd about research applications, not just other than primarily tropical, but for temperate climates. Would you care to have a go at either of those questions?
Oh, yeah, I'm more than happy to. Don't pay attention to my voice. I'm drinking some water, so no problem with that. No, I'm more than happy to entertain more questions. So what was the, research and applications of agroforestry in climates other than primarily tropical? Yeah, that's, well, the Center for Agroforestry has a lot of that. I think
will you pay attention to that?
You have many examples of that.
Yeah, well,
but
the two questions really are looking at, generally from Abigail Smith about what you see as the primary knowledge gaps in looking ahead for agroforestry research, and then more specifically Joseph Todd asking about applications and research for more temperate climates. Right. Yeah. Let me just finish talking about temperate climates because we do work a lot in temperate climates. One of the chapters that we're writing for this new book is on agroforestry in the northeastern U.S. Here in Connecticut and New England, it's temperate cold climate. And there are many agroforestry applications, silvopastoral systems, all kinds of windbreaks and barriers, riparian buffer strips. And there is a lot of what's called forest gardening, forest gardens where people grow mushrooms and all kinds of other species, ginseng, so there are many applications in temperate climates. In Europe, I have seen a lot of agroforestry systems where sheep are grown under oaks. In Spain, in France, many silvopastoral systems apply perfectly all right in temperate systems. Perhaps in temperate systems, in comparison with tropical systems, the agroforestry systems do not put as much emphasis on the nutrient cycling aspects. In tropical ecosystems, nutrient recycling is so much faster because of the annual litter fall that decomposes. And perhaps in temperate ecosystems, it takes a little bit longer for the nutrient recycling characteristics, the nutrient recycling advantages to be so obvious. So I think in temperate systems, the emphasis is perhaps played more on the economic interactions, like systems you can see in Iowa when people plant
soybeans and corn and sided by walnut trees. They're mostly thinking about the economic interaction. It's really good to have walnut trees because walnuts are so valuable. And the corn, it's your annual income. You're planting corn and soybeans. That's your annual income. So it's a way of diversifying outputs and diversifying investment in temperate ecosystems. And then there is a lot of emphasis on windbreaks because in temperate and cold climates, you have strong winds and cold weather that affects animals a lot. So all kinds of windbreaks and barriers and hedges that can defend the animals and the crops against the extremes of weather, they make a lot of sense in temperate ecosystems as well. So I think probably that would be the only difference, I would say, between temperate agroforestry and tropical agroforestry, that perhaps in temperate ecosystems, the nutrient recycling processes happen a little bit more slowly and they're not that obvious, and perhaps there is more of an emphasis on the economic combinations. For example, the alley cropping systems in tropical ecosystems, generally they plant tree species that are nitrogen fixing species, and the farmers prune the trees to deposit the biomass in the middle, in the alleys between the rows of trees, and that way they can plant corn or beans or manioc. While alley cropping, the same concept in temperate climates, it's just growing rows of trees and then growing annual or perennial crops in the middle. But people are not talking about pruning those trees and using that to recycle the biomass and the nutrients in the middle. And so probably that's the only difference. But I think agroforestry is very important in temperate ecosystems as well. And what was the other related question?
Simply had asked that if you had any perspective on looking forward on what are the knowledge gaps for agroforestry research looking forward.
That's that's an interesting question. But of course, that's a little bit biased. The answer is a little bit biased because it generally refers to the kinds of things that one is interested in. My own personal interest in agroforestry is how to integrate more indigenous species in agroforestry. So for me, the most important gap in agroforestry research is exactly that, the domestication of indigenous species. There are so many species that are growing in forests and worldwide, and you know that they are there, but how long will they be there with present needs for land, for agriculture? So for me, a major gap in agroforestry is all the species that need to be domesticated, and I say that with quotes, domesticated, meaning how to grow a tree out of the forest. It's not as easy. You need to be able to find a seed. Many trees don't have viable seeds. You need to reproduce them in other ways, vegetatively. And then if they have seed, how to preserve that seed, how to grow the seedlings in the nursery. And then once the seedlings are there, then how to plant those trees. As you know, trees vary in terms of the shade requirements they may have. And then plant them in association with what? So what crops or other trees can be used with those particular species of trees or shrubs? So probably what's like the ABC of agroforestry, that's why I put some emphasis in the seminar on the multipurpose trees and shrubs, because it's like the ABC of agroforestry. Agroforestry is based on the use of multiple purpose trees and shrubs in association with the crops or animals. I think what's the basis of agroforestry? There's still a lot that needs to be done in that regard. And then the other end of the spectrum, which is the financial analysis, the questions that we still have unanswered the questions that we raised at the end of the seminar. Are the farmers getting a real fair share of the benefit, the financial benefit from the products? That still has left lots of unanswered questions. So I think that's a major research gap in agroforestry.
Thank you, Florencia. Yeah, there's as much as the foundation of research over the last 3 or 4 decades and has provided numerous data on the benefits of agroforestry systems, and some of this we have some pretty good evidence for in terms of environmental performance, and but still quite a number of areas for potential research, whether it's demonstrating more precisely more data on the carbon capture potential and actual performance in different systems.
That's true.
To working with specialty crops. You, in response to Joseph Todd's questions about temperate applications, you did mention a few things, and sure, Joseph or others, if you're interested to learn more about research and development work for temperate agroforestry systems, that has been the main focus of our center, the Center for Agroforestry at the University of Missouri for many decades, and do please either go to centerforagroforestry.org or write us, and happy to share more information about the range of research and development of agroforestry systems, from some of the things that Florencia was just mentioning with development of systems such as windbreaks, riparian buffers, and the alley cropping systems, to research and development on a range of specialty crops, from developing certain native fruit species like pawpaw, elderberry, and persimmon and others, and black walnut, and developing cultivars for use in agroforestry systems, to other dimensions of the science and practices of temperate agroforestry systems. So, well, I think, Florencia, we've covered a lot of ground, and you've given a very rich and presentation, and gone the extra mile and fielded another half hour of questions. So I really thank you, and I regret apologies for overtaxing your voice there. But wanted to thank you very much, and remind the participants that this presentation has been recorded, and a recorded copy of this presentation will be posted on the webinar series website. That's agroforestryinaction.org, and on that website you'll also find schedule for upcoming webinars, and also on our website, centerforagroforestry.org, you'll find information again about the work of our center and other events. Please notice at the bottom of the screen here, Florencia has included information about how you can find and download some of her publications, and if you were interested in any follow-up with Florencia, I'm not sure if I see an email address for you, but please, oh, there we are. There's Florencia's contact information. Oops.
In this one here. You see,
Right.
We went too far, in this slide, you can see my email there.
I'll let you do it. I think there's a timing lag.
Okay, we're both doing it. That's why. That's why. You can see there my email. I answer all my emails. I pride myself of answering all my emails. And then you can see more of my website, the Yale EDU. That would lead you more to my faculty profile and all that, and the Global Institute. But then you can find me on LinkedIn too. You can find me on Facebook with my professional page there, Montagnini AF. And I have my all my own website, WordPress.com website. You can find descriptions of my projects, and also a link to that agroforestry book in Spanish is available there in the WordPress.com. So I'll be more than happy to entertain questions or to interact with you in any ways. Answering the questions, to me, is one of the most enjoyable parts of the seminar, because the seminar can be like, okay, I'm telling you this and this and this, but when you answer questions, that's the real challenge. That's what makes you think. And you see the interests of different people, where the interests of different people goes. So that's, to me, it's very rewarding to spend the extra time answering
you've
questions.
demonstrated so much today. I mean, we're spending a good chunk of time after the session. So thank you so much for the presentation and for engaging with us in some questions and answers. Again, thanks to our presenter today, Dr. Florencia Montagnini, and thank you to everyone who joined us, all the participants who joined us, and check back again at agroforestryinaction.org for upcoming webinars. So, goodbye, everyone.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Gregory, and thank you everyone for their attention, and we'll be in touch with many of you, I'm sure.